Let's give thanks for the study of Torah. Adonai, our God, let the words of Torah be between our mouths and the mouths of your people, Israel, so that we, our descendants, and the descendants of all your people, may know you by studying Torah for its own sake. Baruch atah Adonai, Amen. Torah that the Lord is all right.
I'll share with Matt.
We might be able to finish the second book of Samuel this morning. Thank you to the resourceful people who have brought in the table, an extra table. Well, we might be able to finish the second book of Samuel this morning, but the story continues in the first book of Kings. So don't worry, if we finish early, we don't get out early. But like, here's the question: do we want to do the Book of Kings, or do we want to do something else?
This is something else.
I don't know. That's open to you. But the Book of Kings, like, will continue the story of Solomon, and I think we should do that. I think we should do the first Book of Kings for a while at least, but then we get into the stories of Elijah and Elisha. I mean, it's still good stuff. So I'll put it for King. What do you think?
We trust your
Yeah.
judgment.
What's that?
At least finish Solomon for sure.
You know more than all the rest of us.
Okay, great.
Well, once you.
We're here.
What are you interested in? Maybe.
No.
So we. Okay.
That's what Matthew's interested in.
Joe, but
That's the end.
Joe, Joe is very dense. Poetry was very hard language, and most of it is not a story, right? Most of it is very dense poetry for like just different 37 chapters or something. It might be. Okay, good. So I think we're on chapter 20.
Wow.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, we finished the death of Absalom, right? And how everybody, after Absalom's death, everybody came back to David's side, right? So someone wanted to take a page number for the cheaters.
690. 690 is right.
Is that right? We're on chapter 20, I'm pretty sure, yeah.
I had thought 18.
Are we in 18 or 20?
20.
It was 20 on 690.
I'm pretty sure we finished, yeah, I'm pretty sure we're on chapter 20. Second Samuel chapter 20.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we're still, all the people are coming back to David's side. Civil war has ended, right? And so someone read chapter 20.
A scoundrel named Sheba, son of Hershey,
Decree,
a Benjamin, happened to be there.
right? When you say Benjamin, what do you think of?
David's
Tribe of
Okay,
Israel.
it's Judah, but it's one of the tribes, but whose tribe is it?
Oh,
Saul's tribe. Saul's tribe. So the Benjaminites were never so hot on David, right?
He sounded the horn and proclaimed, "We have no portion in David, no share in Jesse's son. Every man to his tent, O Israel. All the men of Israel left David and followed Sheba, son of Berechi. But the men of Judah accompanied their king from Jordan to Jerusalem. David went to his palace in Jerusalem, and the king took the 10 concubines he had left to mind the palace and put them in a guarded place. He provided for them, but he did not cohabitate with them. He remained in seclusion until they remained in seclusion until the day they died in a living widowhood.
Right, what happened to these 10 concubines?
They were
They're the ones who got it.
isolated.
So he left them in Jerusalem when he fled, right? But what happened to them while they were in
Oh,
prison.
they slept with them all.
Right, his son,
That's right.
Absalom,
Right.
and now what's David's doing to them?
Punishment.
Punishing them, right?
None of
Well, not it, just like Michal, his wife, you know,
Not exactly.
right. Yeah, so,
them.
okay, but what, why would he do that?
So that's not to continue Absalom's line.
Perhaps, right, okay,
They were sullied.
maybe, yeah,
Right?
I
As
mean,
an example.
it's
to-
misogynist, yes, but throw that on the table, we don't have to,
As an example to
yeah, maybe, yeah.
teaching.
What they do wrong?
Absalom, David's son, when he came into the palace, right, to take over the palace, he slept with him. Publicly, on the roof, right, just show his power, right, they get. Right.
That's what I said, yeah.
That's what's happening, he's not, yeah.
He
He's
ignores
not
his,
great.
he ignores his family's family.
Yes. It's when he's not tied up with his family, he's a good king, but when he's forgetting about being a king, he's, you know, with his family, so it's, what does that say about leaders?
He can't multitask.
It's hard.
Yeah.
When you are what is a king, think of the King of England now. Alright, the
Right.
King of England represents the people, right? He is not a person. Right? Even though they try to be people, he is not a person. That's what monarchy does to you. He's the crown. Yeah, exactly. He is the nation, or whatever, right? Yeah. In America, we don't have that so much. We kind of do. We split the president into two roles. But we get rid of the president every few years and a new person, right? So then they can have a life again. But yeah, in monarchies, even though the person still is political and running the nation, they are the nation, right? And so, is this book saying it tears apart your life?
It shows that family has added a layer of complexity and.
Yeah.
Making excuses.
I'm making excuses for David?
Yeah.
I'm not, okay, sorry. But yes, and what did Samuel say when the people wanted a king, right? What did he say the king's gonna do?
Become a monarchy.
Well,
Because that's,
right,
they end up, that's what they do is they get power and
right,
That's what
and bad things happen, yeah. And yet, what was the good things of having a king?
These people together.
People
Strong.
together, but what can the king do that the judges couldn't do? Defend
Right,
the people
protection.
because they have a draft, because they have a standing army, they raise taxes for a standing army, they build things for them.
Centralized government.
They centralize the government, which it has its advantages, right?
So you avoid the intertribal warfare
Sometimes,
until you don't.
yeah, until you don't, right? But what did David do? And we'll see more of on infrastructure, right? We have to look at the mundane infrastructure, right? And security and.
So according to the article you sent, it was the beginning of the Iron Age.
Yeah, right. If you saw the article I sent from Mars, which is a great archaeology section, right? They're trying to date, there's a town called, there was a biblical town called Gezer, which we'll see it was Solomon built, fortified Gezer, it says in the book of Kings, which is now, the books there. And they're trying to date it and see how big the kingdom was, and was it a kingdom, was this the Canaanites who built it, was it the Israelites, right?
It seemed to be that there was a controversy about how to date the
Right.
remains.
Right.
Some people do it by style of pottery, some people do it strictly by carbon 14,
Yeah.
and really you should do both.
Well, right now here, this is an aside, but related to archaeology. Right now, top archaeologists in Israel are working with the army to identify people, right? Because archaeologists know how to spot a bone fragment and get DNA from it, right? So,
Well, yeah,
Sad.
physical anthropologists.
yeah, but that's what, like anybody does that, you know. Okay, so, yes, verse 4.
The king said to Amasa,
Amasa.
call up the men of Judah to my standard. And report here 3 days from now.
Right, so who's Amasa? Or Amasa, we're saying English, but Amasa, who is he? Remember last week?
Absalom's commander in the rebellion.
Absalom
Oh.
commander who David made his general.
Which
Right?
the guy and the other guy left. 'cause
Well,
he's-
Joab hasn't left, but David's been for years trying to get rid of him, maybe. Right, because remember David made Saul's general Abner the general, but Joab killed him, right? So he was stuck with Joab, his cousin. And now he made Amasa his general, right? Okay.
Amasa went to call up Judah. But he took longer than the time set for him. And David said to Abishai.
Abishai, one of his generals, right, who's Joab's brother.
Now Sheba, son of Bichri, will cause us more trouble than Absalom. So take your Lord's servant and pursue him before he find fortified town and eludes us. Joab's men, the Chironites and the Lephites, and all the warriors marched out behind him. They left Jerusalem in pursuit of Sheba, son of Bichri.
So,
They were.
Hold on.
David being strategic.
And
Okay.
and panicking.
so. Did he think that Amasa would take more time and therefore, and maybe was on the side of Sheba
Oh,
than Bichri? And therefore he got him out of town and then sent Abishai after him? You know,
Oh,
that
boy.
could be the case, right?
or did he tell him to go muster like all the men in Judah in 3 days and?
And it
and
was
send
a
a
possible task, knowing that he needs to send out a hit man to get. Just in case, just in case. Sheba and the Matzah were on the same side, right? Okay.
They were near the great stone in Gideon, where Amasa appeared before them. Joab was wearing his military dress and his sword girded over it and fastened around his waist in a sheath. And he stepped forward, it fell out. Joab said to Amasa, how are you, brother? And with his right hand, Joab took hold of Amasa's beard as if to kiss him.
Uh-oh.
Amasa was not on his guard against a sword in Joab's left hand. And Joab drove it into the belly
God.
so that it entrails poured out on the ground and he died. He did not need to strike him a second time.
Oh,
Yay, the Iron Age.
wow.
Remember, judges would, it was Gideon who was left-handed and the king didn't,
Mhm.
shook his hand and didn't notice that he also had a sword, right?
But it says that he had fastened it around his waist and it fell out.
Right, so it was a ploy.
No, it did,
Took it out.
it like it,
No, he had another sword.
Another sword.
Oh, yeah, the second
That's
one.
right, you
oh,
I didn't notice.
You
it.
don't notice the
That's
side.
what's on.
Oh, God.
And again, we have the attention to the clothes he's wearing,
Yeah.
you know,
Right?
Very
There's your little
interesting.
clothes.
it's fashionista
Yeah.
Bible here.
Yeah.
Another,
Yeah.
Joab and his brother Abishai then set off in pursuit of Sheba, son of Bichri, while one of Joab's henchmen stood by the corpse and called out, whoever favors Joab and whoever is on David's side, follow Joab. Amasa laid in the middle of the road, drenched in his blood. And the man saw that everyone stopped. And when he saw that all the people were stopping, he dragged Amasa from the road into the field and covered him with a garment. Once he was removed from the road, everybody continued to follow Joab in pursuit of Sheba, son of
Bichri. So now, if you, what is he, these are like the last holdouts of Absalom's men, right?
Oh.
And they would say, now you're with David, because we're,
You have
Yeah, if you're not.
no choice.
Yeah.
Make them an offer.
Why did he take it off the road? Because
Well-
it's good that the people saw that he was there.
Right, but
Distract-
taking off the road is the sign of respect, right? Leaving it in the
Oh.
road uncovered is
Oh, okay.
that
So
one.
left it long enough for people to see and then.
No, but once he sees that everybody's on their side, then he's like, okay, now we can, you know, now we can respect your leader. Right?
Sheba had passed through all the tribes of Israel up to Abel of Beth Maacah, and all the Herites assembled and followed him inside.
So what's inside what? It's probably a fortified town.
Town.
Let's see.
How did we know that, that Amasa was,
I don't, was maybe still
bad.
against David.
yeah, there's
I-
no indication.
No,
that
remember, so like
He's
David,
just murdered.
right, remember, that's what Yoav does. Yoav has that intuition and David kind of lets it happen.
So he's like Luke Brasi.
And then, like, yeah, Yoav just knows, or does David know and knows that Yoav has, don't have the powers or something like that, I don't know.
They'll take care of
He'll take care of it, yeah, that's kind of what, so maybe David sent him on an impossible task so that Yoav would take care of it, yeah, I don't know.
Okay. I'm just kind of getting over that.
So now Yoav's in charge again and going to besiege this guy Sheva Ben Bichri, right, who seems to have fortified himself with 20 people, right?
Yoav's men came and besieged him in Abel of Beth Maacah, and they threw up a siege mound against the city, and it stood against the rampart.
What's a siege mound?
That's what they did at Masada.
Like a fence.
Uh,
or-
You build a hill so you can get up over the wall, right?
Oh,
They had combat engineers, as they said.
Literally siege mountain.
Yeah,
That's
so that you can get your.
Your
Work
troops
up.
up.
Like the rampant Messiah.
Right, so like in Masada, if you've been to Masada, the way to get up Masada, how the
Romans.
the Jews got out of, there's this path that takes up the mountain. So what the Romans do? Okay, the Jews are stuck in this fortress, we'll build a huge ramp, and it took them years, and they built a ramp, and so then you go up a ramp and you're in.
I like the cable car.
I was gonna say, that came later. Yeah, right.
You could walk the path. Or you could, from the other side, which actually takes like an hour to drive around the whole way to get to the other side if you're in a bus, you just walk up a ramp, or you can take a cable car, which they did not have 2,000 years
I
ago.
walked
but-
that.
Right.
I walked that.
Right, so hey, but. You're saying, okay, they went all over themselves in a fortress, okay,
Jimmy.
we'll build a
He
ramp.
was.
In Masada, at Masada, they watched them build this.
Yes.
Yeah, they watched them, so
They had
I mean,
they knew they could do.
hundreds of troops building
I think that's generic.
They saw the Jewish slaves down there doing it.
building it, yeah.
I think that's generic on any siege ramp, is that you'll be watching it as it's built, because
Right.
you're being sieged.
That's
Yeah.
before.
So,
Right.
And you're
That's how
helpless,
long
you're
I've been in
helpless
the
to do anything about it.
Yep, right, I mean, you're not helpless, because we've seen the thing, like you have, I mean, you have boiling oil that you pour over onto the people, you have, spears that you'll eventually run out if you're stocked in, if you're seized, right? Going cows like fighting back on yeah. But that's one bad thing about being in a gated place. Okay.
Take another one, or you want-
Yeah, okay, someone else can pick up, where are we at? We're at-
we're at, all the-
I got it. All the troops with Yoav were engaged in battering the wall when a clever woman shouted from the city, listen, tell Yoav to come over here so I can talk to him.
Right, so it's often
A
women
wo-
who save the day.
a
in
woman,
this book,
right.
Yeah.
He approached her and the woman asked, are you Yoav? Yes, he answered. And she said to him, listen to what your handmaid has to say. I'm listening, he replied. And she continued, in olden times, people used to say, let them inquire of Abel. And that was the end of the matter. I'm one of those who seek the welfare of the faithful in Israel. But you seek to bring death upon a mother city in Israel. Why should you destroy the Lord's possession? Yoav replied,
Can we stop one second?
Yeah.
Hang on. So I often don't comment on the changes in translation between the two, but it's vastly different here. Is this a poem or written that way originally? Is that why Alder did it so differently?
Is it a poem?
Different writers.
Or just,
No,
you know, just read the wrong thing.
no.
Why is it read
Surely would they speak in days of old, saying, surely will they ask counsel of Abel and thus conclude, I am of the peaceable, steadfast of Israel. You seek to put to death the mother city in Israel. Why should you engulf the Lord's heritage? So again, usually it's a couple of phrases here and there that are different, but that felt significantly different.
Maybe.
And it's
Close.
written as a poem in English
She puts it as a poem.
or indented or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. I don't know. I mean, he made it seem like she's kind of saying, saying familiar words of the people of the time, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But what is she saying?
No, she's
Why
saying,
you-
why are you?
Destroying
Like,
it.
why does it make sense? Why are you gonna do this?
Yeah, why are you doing this? But what,
Then could we get to the next part?
It's a loyalty, that was question.
Don't destroy the city.
Don't- right.
destroy it.
We're on the same side, isn't it?
we're on the same side. We're all Israelites.
Yoav replied, far be it from me to destroy or to ruin, not at all. But a certain man from the hill country of Ephraim named Sheba, son of Bichri, has rebelled against the king David. Just hand him over, hand him the loan over to us, and I will withdraw from the city. The woman assured Yoav, his head will be thrown over the wall to you. The woman came, yeah, woman came to all the people with a clever plan, and they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri, and threw it down to Yoav. He then sounded the horn. All the men dispersed to their homes, and Yoav returned to the king in Jerusalem.
So it worked out well for everybody but Sheba.
Yeah.
So you remember this?
It's you or us.
Earlier with Saul,
Go to the many for the-
I forgot which city, but they did with the, someone escaped to a city and they threw him out, remember? It happened before,
Like with Jonah, they threw him overboard.
they threw him overboard, that was a little bit different, but yes. But why? What the wise woman realized that civil war is not worth it, right?
Yoav was commander of the whole army of Israel. Benaiah, son of Jediodah, was commander of the Cherethites and the Pelethites. Adoram was in charge of the forced labor.
Yehoshaphat, Yehoshaphat.
Jehoshaphat, yeah, him too. And son of Aliah was recorder. Sheba was scribe, thank you. And Zadok and Abiathar were priests. Hira the Jaredite served David as priest.
Okay, so
Good job.
we're giving the roll call of all the important officials. Okay, what, the cabinet?
Yeah.
Right. So these like how the Cherethites and Pelethites, like, it seems like there are foreign people in the army, right? That's one way that you. What that, conscripts of subjugated people, right? But you also have conscripts of Israelites, right? So they are serve different roles, right? And like, the Roman emperor, this all the time, right? Yeah.
So are they conscripts or they feel
No,
like they are
So
loyal to the king, they're doing it?
they're, well, so the other peoples
Yeah.
might be loyal to the king because they conquered,
Yeah.
they conquered them, right?
For a minute.
But what's the, who was it, the forced labor, right? So that was the system.
Adoram.
Right. Adoram was the head of the forced labor, labor was, that was part of taxes, right? Remember what Samuel said, is what's gonna happen with everything. So partly there's a draft for the army, partly there's a draft for building infrastructure
Right.
too, right? That's how you paid your taxes also, was your son. Your
Did-
son went to build the roads, and your daughter went to work in the bakery or whatever, right? It says, Samuel said that too, right? And so the bakery for the armies and the road workers and stuff, so That was part of
The payment.
paying taxes, called a Corvair system.
The Inca did that too.
Yeah, all people did that, right, yeah, right. There was no cash money at the, I mean, there was some coins and things like that, but most money was your labor or your
Land.
crops or your produce or your
Animal.
your animals, right?
Oh.
Is the forced labor slavery?
No, because it's for a set time, right? But it's everybody's in this together, right? It's the whole, but like you could say a draft of the army is slavery. But they pay you a little bit, but like, yeah. Like, it's not quite slavery because it's a contract, right? You get forced, but it's limited,
Indentured servitude.
kind of,
Yeah,
kind
but
of.
it's not,
It's
like,
not-
yeah.
It's like
But
paying taxes.
Paying taxes, but it's not the same thing as indentured servitude, which was
That's
most
fine,
of the
yeah.
slavery in Israel. Was indentured servitude was your crops failed, you went into debt, so you gave yourself to your neighbor to work off their debts, right? That was indentured servitude.
Or to get away.
So
Or whatever, yeah, you your labor as collateral, that's what.
Jacob did.
I just read something online within the last few days that New Jersey has a program, depending on your city or locale, where you can do work for the town
Mhm.
instead of your real estate taxes.
Oh, yeah.
Or to defer at least, yeah, I don't know exactly how it works, but you apparently have to
I mean, it's kind of
contact your local government and,
work study programs in colleges, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's forced labor.
My
You know,
George College has strike and struck against that.
internships, although now there's laws that you have to pay interns, I think, for a certain thing, but internships are forced labor,
Yes.
yes, right?
A lot of this is-
We don't have a totally free market,
No,
as much as.
but they're learning.
But.
Interns learn, so that's.
you gotta
They get
oh,
credits, they get credits,
Yeah.
they get college credits.
Well, in America, the whole university system in America is now a screwed up market that causes slavery too, but.
Here we go. Like colonial days where people, they'd have people.
Barter.
Started an apprentice
Yeah,
for years and they give like
But you
5
live-
years
you
to
live
learn
with
that
them.
trade. They
You
might not
live-
get paid
you
for
live-
that. 5 years.
You got room and board from the.
But you didn't really get, but you learn that trade.
Yeah, learn that trade,
Yeah.
because there used to be, you had to be an apprentice to get into the trade, because the trades were called guilds that would
Guilds, yeah.
keep people out.
Yeah.
Right, it wasn't a free market, it was a closed shop.
And the Jews weren't allowed in those guilds.
The Jews weren't allowed in guilds, Jews had their own professions that they could do, yeah. In
That's
Middle Ages of Europe, yeah.
That's a holdover from Middle Ages Europe.
Yeah,
That's, and
True, yeah.
most of the indentured servants in the Americas, that's how they paid their passage.
right. Right.
They promised to work for a certain.
7 years.
7 years.
What happens today? Smugglers, people from Central America.
That would make sense.
I mean, it's illegal, but smugglers will say, we'll get you a job, they steal your passport, right?
Mm.
And you work off. And they get your passport back,
Which
right?
is why 14-year-olds are working in slaughterhouses at midnight.
100%.
You don't even have to go to,
Yeah, I mean, if that happens, I'm sure that happens in Morristown.
Yes.
you don't have to go to that. I mean, I work with people
Landscapes.
on H-1B visas and then
Well,
there's now it's.
right, but at least, I mean, H-1B visas are legal, right?
They're legal, but it's.
They're getting paid, right?
Certain kind of.
That's how the Olympic Village was built in Qatar.
Oh, for sure,
They
yeah.
took all their passports.
Yeah, in Qatar, the country, the vast majority of the residents of Qatar are foreign workers. Right, that are baseless. So, yeah.
Well,
But that happened
37
here.
hostages in Gaza are foreign
Foreign
workers.
workers, yeah. Right, Israel is not good. Here, I'm gonna critique Israel right now. Israel is horrible with foreign workers. Meaning, like, there are people in Israel that will steal their passports and things like that, or, keep their passports from them. And Israel, if you're a foreign worker, you're not allowed to get married.
Right.
Then they think, and so in Tel Aviv, there are, South Tel Aviv near the bus station, there are foreign workers who have families and stuff, that's illegal, and they can deport you for having a family. And so there are kids, parents are from Thailand or the Philippines or in Nepal, and they, go to school, and they're learning Hebrew, and, Israel's the only country they've known, but they're, illegal immigrants and stuff, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you get, I've never understood how unique or not unique the United States is with birthright citizenship.
Right, pretty unique. Yeah.
So they're now,
Canada has birthright system. Do it. My kids were born in America, but are Canadian citizens. We get Canadian citizens.
Hmm.
You had to, you had
And
to
to
tell
apply.
them, but yeah.
yeah. But so like in Israel, if they're foreign workers and they have children who are born in Israel, those children are not
To
Israeli.
become an Israeli citizen, you have to be a Jew, pretty much. There's other ways, but pretty much you have to be a Jew, or married to a Jew, or have a grandparent who is a Jew. And
That's another 4-hour discussion.
you need a record. Pretty much.
Jewish agency.
There's the Jewish agency, yeah.
And
No,
no, Rabbi wrote Jake a letter.
yeah, yeah. So it's,
Oh.
it makes it even more confusing, you know. So to be a Jew for citizenship,
Needed it for a
this means
visa.
you need one grandparent who's a Jew. But then, that's to become a citizen of Israel, but then when you get to Israel, the Interior Ministry will write in your internal ID card, if you're halakhically a Jew, which means under Jewish law, if you're a Jew, and if you only have a Jewish paternal grandparent where you can be considered a citizen, you won't be a Jew in the country, which means you can't marry another Jew or get buried in the Jewish cemetery, right? And so I could, until you, so how do you get Jew written in your internal passport card? You convert in Israel, or you have to get a picture, you know, one way to do it, is you go to the rabbinate, the rabbis there, the Orthodox rabbinate, and you get a picture of your maternal grandmother's grave, right? You see a Jewish grave, that means you're a Jew, or your maternal grandmother's ketubah or something.
Is it true that only Orthodox, is it still true that only Orthodox conversions count for that?
Within Israel, to be a halakhic Jew means that you could then get married, right? But to be a citizen, which is slightly different, you can convert under reform in America.
Yeah, but then you can't marry a Jew.
But you couldn't marry a Jew in
So-
Israel.
so-
But a lot of people in Israel today, a lot of people, halakhic Jews too, are not getting married under the rabbinate. But we don't know the exact number because the rabbinate doesn't want to say what the exact number is. So people go, if you go to another
Go
country,
online.
you could, I'll say that in a second, if you go to another country and you get married, then Israel will recognize it, right? People used to be, you want to go to Cyprus, which is a short, 1.5 hour plane ride away. Now people go, Utah does online marriages.
Oh, my God.
So it's Utah does online marriages. And so you can be in Israel on Zoom with some clerk in Utah and he's marrying you, and then it counts, and Israel will count that marriage. Including gay marriage,
Yes.
right?
we do
Including
like
gay marriage,
foreign
which
countries.
Israel doesn't have gay marriage within the country, but if you have gay marriage outside of the country, they recognize it in Israel.
And
At Utah?
No, it's not.
I mean, no,
Because it's the law of the land in America that every government person has to marry gay people. Right,
Yeah.
but if they're a government clerk, they have to marry a gay person.
there was,
So they just, they're making money.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
right.
but
They would not be
Utah,
Jewish.
yeah.
Or they could be Jewish because.
Were they converted?
No.
Ah,
They were
Right,
mis-
so if they were not officially converted, no.
They were converted when they're born. I don't know. How
So-
they converted when you're born?
there's a ritual.
You go to New Mexico.
There you go. They didn't go to the-
so, Rabbi, just-
Still time, there's still time.
so there's no civil marriage in
There's no
Israel,
marriages.
but marriage is recognized as a legal contract. If you've been married elsewhere, you get all the rights of marriage.
Correct. You know, tax
And-
rights, visitation rights, things like that.
If you have that paternal grandparent who is Jewish,
Paternal. You need a
paternal,
veteran.
but, and that's enough to give you citizenship.
Yeah.
What, except for the marriage issues, what are you not able to do with that kind of citizenship as opposed to one that has the
What do you-
stamp
What do
Jew?
you're not able to marry another Jew in Israel, and you're not able to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. But you will get drafted into the army. If you die,
Whoa.
you have to get buried somewhere else.
So if you die in battle?
And there's non-Jewish cemeteries, but yeah.
It's okay to fight, but you can't die.
Yeah,
And
the
can
big problem
a
is-
rabbi bury you?
Right.
Can a rabbi conduct your funeral? If
Not
you're,
if you're non-Jewish, like the
Well-
rabbis or Orthodox rabbis who are employed by the city that they live in, when they do the funerals. Yeah.
What about the few Reform rabbis in a non-Jewish separate?
Yeah, so there are private rabbis who are not, you know.
State employees.
Not state employees. Yeah, so some kibbutzim have their own cemeteries that they can do whatever they want. I think kibbutz, right?
Okay.
Although now there was a big controversy because that girl of Russian descent who hasn't finished her conversion was not, that they refused
Oh, yeah.
for her to be buried there, but then.
That she died in the army, is that what?
No, in the, on October 7th.
Oh, yeah,
But then the rabbinate said that was a mistake. I think they.
they some kind of public pressure or like, and like military cemeteries too, so there are non-Jews who get drafted, especially the Druze community. And when they die, there are sections in the Jewish military cemetery where Druze get buried.
There's other,
Purpose of all the exclusions and exemptions.
What's the purpose?
Keep it pure.
Yours have periods of included word.
Yeah,
What's the purpose?
Absolutely.
Well, so. Israel 1948 was defined as a state for Jews, right, or a Jewish state. So here's a preview of my 2 classes on Zionism in the first and second week of December, which is
coming up.
Advertisement.
on a Thursday. What is the purpose? So you have to define what it means to be a Jew if you're a Jewish state, right? And so there's different definitions of what is a Jew. So the definition for citizenship, you have one Jewish grandparent, right? Who made that definition, you know?
comes from the Nazis.
Comes from the Nuremberg laws.
Yeah.
If you had one Jewish grandparent, you were persecuted by the Nazis.
Whoa.
But the definition of 2,000 years of traditional Jewish law is if you have a Jewish mother, right? And so there's 2 definitions of what it means to be a Jew. Now, I might have talked about this before. I don't know how we got to this from David here, but like
That's good stuff.
here's a famous Supreme Court case in Israel, I think in the 1950s. There was a man, a Catholic monk, Brother Daniel. Brother Daniel was born as a Jew in Poland and survived the Holocaust in a monastery, fell in love with Catholicism, converted to Catholicism. He wanted to make Aliyah to Israel.
Wow. Okay.
The Interior Ministry said no. What the Supreme Court say?
Yes.
No, the Supreme Court said no, even though in traditional Jewish law, he had 2 Jewish parents. Even a Jew who sins is still a Jew. You cannot get rid of your Judaism in traditional Jewish law, but the Supreme Court is realizing we have different definitions of what it means to be a Jew, and ultimately they decided when you become a Christian, you've turned away from being a Jew. Right?
Wow.
He might have eventually got citizenship. Like the Israeli government can give citizenship to people, something they usually do it to soccer stars. But here's a big issue in Israel too, so. Palestinians who live in the state of Israel are Israeli citizens, right? You live in Haifa or Nazareth, whatever, you know, you're an Israeli citizen. What happens when you want to get married to someone who lives in the West Bank? A Palestinian who lives in the West Bank?
You probably can't.
You can, but that person can't live with you.
Wait a minute, there's a difference between Arab living in Israel and
No,
Palestinian living.
everybody calls themselves Palestinians. We Jews say, oh, they're different. No, they call themselves Palestinians. And I want to respect people's self-definition. Palestinian Israeli citizens versus Palestinians living in the West Bank, right? Israel does not allow the person living in the West Bank to become a citizen. They could come sometimes, but they need to get special passes to come, yeah. So you cannot marry anybody you want, right? It isn't, yeah.
Just bringing it a little closer to home, number of years ago when I was on the board, it came up the fact that our synagogue's constitution states that in order to be president, you have to be Jewish.
Yeah.
And I raised the question, well, what is Jew? What is it to be Jewish? And I think it was Keith Barbaros or somebody said, just be quiet.
You know that all.
The reform movement, only in America, the reform movement. In some Canadian congregations accept it, and some Canadian congregations don't, but in Europe, I'm not quite sure. but the reform movement in America said. If you have, so the traditional definition from the Talmud was that if you have a Jewish mother, you're automatically Jewish, right? The reform movement in 1983 in America said, if you have a Jewish father and were raised as a Jew. Now, does that mean if you have a Jewish mother, you also have to be raised as a Jew to be considered Jewish? I don't know. It might mean that. You could read we could study that a different way. And so that was a huge rift in the Jewish community in the 80s that still plays out in some different ways. Like, you know,
Who's
they're
eligible for birthright.
no eligible for birthright. They use is very liberal. Birthright meaning the trips pre-trip to Israel. They're very
feel
liberal.
Jewish.
As long as if
One
if you had a
grandparent.
Jewish grandparent, as long as you consider yourself a Jew and are not practicing Christianity, they bring.
That's it.
Yeah.
Ah.
Right. That's what they pretty much say. But it's an issue like. I know conservative congregations that still have the traditional definition, don't want their youth group to do dances with the Reformed Jewish youth group or something like that, right? And so, it's you know, it's intra-Jewish politics is, I mean, defining who's in and who's out is what any kind of group does, right? Whether you have a open definition or a more closed definition, but, it's, you know, we have to define who's an American citizen, right? And, you know, we can have an open definition or we can have a more closed definition, but like groups mean definition, right?
But it also, I mean, even in the US, rabbis decide, like my brother got married to someone whose dad was Jewish, her mom wasn't.
Yeah.
And because the rabbi, wanted to marry them, she had to go through the full
Yeah, right,
version
well,
to
it's probably a conservative Orthodox rabbi, right?
conservative, yeah.
But like for me, like it'll be a question, well, yeah, I mean, I don't, we'll get into that later, but say a question.
Yeah, I'm just curious, in today's standards with Israel, why don't, to determine who's Jewish and who isn't, why don't they do the DNA test? Why can't you show the results?
Because DNA doesn't mean
Because
anything if
they're
you
so-
can convert. And DNA, if you can convert to Judaism, then DNA would not solve that, right?
I would never be a citizen of Israel
No,
because
you could-
I'm
if you convert with
converting.
me, you'd become a citizen.
Oh,
But you can't be, but the rabbinate in Israel, the Orthodox rabbinate wouldn't consider you a Jew. You could be, but you'd be a Jew enough to be a citizen, right?
okay.
So, but
Oh, a
DNA,
little
so I
bit.
don't like when I get uncomfortable when we use DNA for
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
for identity. Because identity is so much more than.
Biological.
Right, because then it gets to the pure question of, you know.
There's no difference in the DNA.
Yeah.
There is, for us, we're Ashkenazi.
Yeah.
But if you're, from the Middle East, if you're a Yemenite
Yeah.
Jew, your DNA looks an awful lot like a Palestinian.
It's a little closer, but it's not exactly,
It's
but.
not exact,
but-
but it's pretty darn close.
You're right,
But-
DNA is not like, you know.
I was just thinking of that because you're saying you have to show proof of your grandmother's grave
so
and
proof
papers
usually documentation.
of the family
Right.
tree.
And I don't know how much DNA has sway in Orthodox law, but documents have sway.
Okay.
And it's more than just being able to marry or bury in Israel. It's health insurance.
No, but any citizen gets health insurance.
Yes, but to be a citizen, you have to be Jewish.
Right, but you have to be Jewish.
One short little sidetrack, it'll be, I'll try to keep it quick. The company I worked for a while was Dassault Aviation. And the founder of Dassault was initially named Marcel Bloch. He was Jewish from France. Was very successful as an aircraft designer. When the war came along, he would refuse to cooperate with the Germans, was put into a concentration camp and almost died. And then when he came out, he reformed his company, but changed his name. His brother's code name in the French underground was Car Dassault, which is the French word for tank. And so that's how he took the name Dassault, D-A, and without the apostrophe, and then converted to Catholicism. And the whole time I was working with the company, nobody really talked about why he converted after the war.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you-
actually, one of the best, most beautiful here, I'm gonna end here. Everybody should read the book. I don't know if it ever came out in America, but it was it did, but it was a big Canadian book written by a well-known Canadian author, and it was called, The Different Gods something like that. I'll look up, but,
Mhm. You're
Allison
gonna
Pick,
ask?
written by Allison Pick. And it was a memoir of hers converting to Judaism, but it turned out her dad came from a Jewish family in Czechoslovakia that converted to Catholicism, and it's this beautiful book about the conversion process to Judaism, and she uses pseudonyms, but like, it's all about my colleagues in Toronto were a huge part of it, my rabbinic colleagues in Toronto were a big part of the book, and the synagogue that I worked at and stuff like that, but it's called, her name's Allison Pick, the name of the
Is
book
it
is
pick or pickers? Pickers.
Pick, P-I-C,
Yes.
Allison Pick. And it's called, like, Beyond the Different God, or Changing God, or something like that.
Between Gods.
Between Gods, there you go.
Between Gods, a memoir.
Yeah, there you go, Between Gods, a memoir. It's a beautiful book. Okay. Back to-
Moving right
I
along.
know, well, this has been bothering me for 20 minutes. The guy in the monastery,
Brother Daniel.
could he convert back to Judaism?
Yeah, well, no, you can't convert, you can convert, converting back to Judaism means you make teshuva. You would go in front of a Beit Din, rabbinic court and say, I disavow my wayward ways, and I.
So he could have done that.
Yeah, he could have done that, but he was a believing Catholic.
All right, I mean, his story was the monks protected him from the Nazis.
Right, but he became a Catholic, they didn't just
I
protect
mean,
him.
he grew up in a monastery because they were protecting him from the Nazis.
Yeah, right, yeah.
It's,
My loyalty probably.
And there's another person too, there's someone running the Catholic Church in Israel today. Who, I think he grew up in South Africa, but he became a Catholic, and was a Jew though. He became a Catholic, he's high up in the Catholic Church in Israel today, like he's like, auxiliary bishop or something important. Yeah.
Sorry.
There was a famine.
Okay, maybe we won't finish the book of Stephen today. So now,
This was great. This was really good. So,
but I'll say, Tuesday the 28th, right after Thanksgiving. A friend of mine from Israel who is a journalist for Yediot Ahronot, the biggest paper in Israel, or one of the biggest papers in Israel. He's also a rabbinical student, a reform rabbinical student. And he's also getting his PhD at the University of Haifa right now in American Jewish history. He's going to be speaking to us on Zoom. We're here, he's there. He'll be speaking to us on Zoom. The time might change, so pay attention. So come ask him those kinds of questions, because as someone in the reform world in Israel, and as a journalist, he knows these kinds of things, but he's also going to be talking about the situation. And then the next week, that week also, on the 30th, we're having another Scientists in Synagogue session. Then the next week, I'll just start talking about Zion, do my class on Zionism. Yeah, a lot happened.
Yeah, not going on.
So Ofer Chizik, you should come to his session.
That's on the 28th.
When you.
Yeah.
But you can come here to watch the Zoom if you want. You don't have to do it at home.
The Hanukkah party is then too.
Yeah, so that's why I might change it. Okay.
There was
So
a-
now the last chapters of the book of Samuel seem to be stories that are kind of tagged on to the books, because they tend to be totally, each chapter is kind of its own story, and we change. They seem to be been like stories about David that the editor couldn't find how to weave it in, and kind of made it like an addendum to the book, right? Is that's probably what Alter said, something like that.
I'm sorry. I don't know what he said. So
Okay, but it's something like
he's
that.
got this
Yeah.
long paragraph. So
Okay, so chapter 21.
There was a famine during the reign of David, year after year for 3 years. David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord replied, "It is because of the blood guilt of Saul and his house, for he put some Gibeonim to death."
The Gibeonites, Saul killed a bunch of people, and everybody gets punished for it.
Is it Gibeonim or is it?
Gi-
Because in the Hebrew it says Gibeonim.
Gibeonites, right? The Gibeonim, right?
Gibeonim, that's what the Hebrew says.
Gibeonim.
On the other hand, Saul wasn't king anymore because he refused to kill some people.
Yes, sure.
The king summoned the Gibeonim and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonim were not of Israelite stock, but a remnant of the Amorites to whom the Israelites had given an oath. And Saul had tried to wipe them out in his zeal for the people of Israel and Judah.
Right, so the Gibeonim were allies, but not Israelites.
David asked the Gibeonim, "What shall I do for you? How shall I make expiation so that you may bless the Lord's own people?" The Gibeonim answered him, "We have no claim for silver or gold against Saul and his household, and we have no claim on the life of any other man in Israel." And David responded, whatever you say, I will do for you.
Hmm.
Thereupon they said to the king, the man who massacred us and planned to exterminate us so that we should not survive in all the territory of Israel, let 7 of his male issue be handed over to us. Wow, and we will impale them before the Lord in Gibeah of Saul, the chosen of the Lord. And the king replied, I will do so.
Oh, uh-oh.
Wow, the king spared Mephibosheth,
Remember, this
Mephibosheth,
is Jonathan's son who he's always swear to protect, right?
son of Jonathan, son of Saul, because of the oath before the Lord between the two, between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. Instead, the king took Harmony and Mephibosheth, the 2 sons that Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, bore to Saul, and the 5 sons that Merab, daughter of Saul, bore to Adriel, son of Barzillai, the Meholite. And he handed them over to the Gibeonim. They impaled them on the mountain before the Lord. All 7 of them perished at the same time. They were put to death in the first days of the harvest, the beginning of the barley harvest. Then Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth and spread it on a rock for herself, and she stayed there from the beginning of the harvest until rain from the sky fell on the bodies. She did not let the birds of the sky settle on them by day, or the wild beasts approach by night. David was told what Saul's concubine Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, had done. And David took the bones of Saul and of his son Jonathan from the citizens of Jabesh Gilead, who had made off with them from the public square of Bethshan, where the Philistines had hung them up on the day of the Philistines killed Saul at Gilboa. He brought up the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from there, and he gathered the bones of those who had been impaled, and they buried the bones of Saul and of his son Jonathan in Zelah in the territory of Benjamin, and the tomb of his father Kish. And when all that the king had commanded was done, God responded to the plea of the land thereafter. Again, war broke out between the Philistines and Israel, and David and the men with him went down and fought the Philistines. David grew weary, and Ishi-Benob tried to kill David. He was a descendant of the Rapha. His bronze spear weighed 300 shekels, and he wore new armor. But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, came to his aid. He attacked the Philistine and killed him. It was then that David's men declared to him on oath, you shall not go with us into battle anymore, lest you extinguish the lamp of Israel.
Too much killing.
After this, fighting broke out again with the Philistines at Gob, and that was when Zebekai the Hushathite killed Sop, a descendant of the Rapha. Again, there was fighting with the Philistines at Gob, and Elhanan, son of Jariorigim, the Bethlehemite, killed Goliath, the Greek, whose spear had a shaft like a weaver's bar.
Right, so is this a different Goliath, or is this a different story, another version of the Goliath story? We don't know.
Once again, there was fighting at Goth. There was a giant of a man who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all. He too was descended from the Rapha. When he taunted Israel, Jonathan, the son of David's brother Shimei, killed him. Those 4 were descended from the Rapha and Goth, and they fell by the hands of David and his men.
So that's so another story, that's kind of technical.
So just to read what Alder has, since it's got a really long thing, but where it fits in the timeline is that this is not like following what we just heard. They place it here rather than after his death, because they want to have a continuity from his death to.
David doesn't die until the beginning of the Book of Kings.
Right, so that's why they put it here.
Interesting to me is I know there's a lot of misogyny in the Bible, talk a lot, but most of the people simply dying. Seem to be men.
Yeah. And the women do the right thing, right?
Yeah.
So the Saul's concubine who's mourning over the bones made David realize I have to marry the people, right? Even the people that I killed, I still have to give them a real burial, right? So, yeah.
I've never known anyone with 6 fingers.
Really?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I was gonna
Like
Princess
Princess
Bride,
Bride,
yeah, of
yeah.
course.
But he only had one hand with 6 fingers.
That's true.
Ooh.
I don't know, I'm sure, maybe it happened.
You're the doctor.
I've never known 6 fingers.
The article that you had mentioned, that archaeological article.
Yeah.
Was talking about a fortified entrance to a city.
Yeah.
Because of all this warfare.
The chamber gate, yeah.
Right, because of all this warfare, and the purpose of it is to establish that Jews were indigenous to the land. And that's why the archaeology in Israel is so important.
Well,
They want
yeah,
to
I mean,
establish that this was
archae-
David and.
right, archaeology has always been political. I mean, archaeology is political, but yeah, but Zionists got into archaeology because it was, you know, Europeans who were doing it. And so Zionist Jews got into archaeology to prove, no, this was us, right?
Right, so that's why they were trying to pinpoint the age of
Yeah,
that
yeah. Well,
structure.
and
So that
especially
they
because,
could assign it to David and
Right.
say, we were here.
right, well, it's also especially because a lot of Bible scholars these days downplay the historicity of the book of Samuel. And say that they were stories written much later, not really reflecting reality, and some, you know, especially Israeli archaeologists are pushing back and saying, no, it is reflecting some of the reality, you know, they can't say all of the reality, but some of the.
Right, David did exist. and
Well, we
Solomon existed.
cannot prove that
Right.
David existed. We can prove that at the time when the book of David says it took place, there were these fortified cities. We can prove that
There's,
you know, there were, you know, that there was a centralized government. We can prove, you know, things like that.
there's one archaeologist find called about somebody being in the house of David.
Yes,
That was
but
like
much
400,
later. We'll get to it.
500 years later.
Yeah,
So is it a story that,
Right.
that the guy adopted the house of David, or was it
was
really?
an actual David that he's a descendant of. With that, that's the closest we've gotten. If we've ever find David's actual seal, then that changes, but you know, it's hard to say. Yeah.
No, I mean, to me, it's sort of interesting, I know it's very political.
Yeah,
right? To me, the whole thing's about politics. And, you know, it's a big lapse in time between this and the modern state of Israel, so I
Yeah.
think there's people trying to,
3,000 years.
yeah, so I mean,
Rabbi,
you know, if you're saying there's land rights 3,000 years old,
as
you
you,
know, they,
It's-
question, as you get towards the end of writing, prophets.
Yeah.
And you're at Second Temple period
Yeah.
after it's been, and as it's been rebuilt.
Yeah.
You have a lot more that correlates between the evidence and the stories.
Yes, yes.
The
Yes.
focus, the focus seems so much on killing. The biblical focus, is there,
Well, it's because we don't pay attention to what the US Army does. There's a lot of killing.
yeah.
There's a lot of killing in
But
America too.
I
yeah.
mean, if you look at our writing,
Yeah, our writing. Because
our
we think
writing
about it.
does not focus as,
So what books as a kid, did you read like books about cowboys and Indians? And did you read things about, you know, the
Mark Twain.
Revolutionary War and? you
Yeah,
know,
that was a science fiction, there's plenty of,
But Matt,
wars
this
and
time
death in
period
that.
is between.
Yeah.
The,
Right.
the land of Israel was always like controlled
Yeah.
by either Egypt
Or,
or Mesopotamia.
yeah,
And this time period, neither one was in control.
right. And so there was,
So there were a lot of warring factions.
or, yeah, right,
but
but,
just going through that list,
Yeah.
is this one killed that
Yeah,
one, that
yeah.
one killed this one.
right.
Took the 7 and put them on
That's the
spikes.
interesting
Right, but
part.
read
They
the-
would write
the-
about
the-
boring stuff.
The end
on
of,
one
the end of the
page.
the end of the Godfather, you know, where they're just killing everybody, like, that's our literature today. We are still just as violent in our literature today as our ancestors were, I would say, right?
I guess I'm struck by how violent we're reading about now.
Right, but I'd say we're just as violent, I mean,
But I think if you look at our literature now, there's a lot of literature
There's-
that
there's a
talks
lot of-
about
there's a lot of
interpersonal
literature you can do.
relations and.
but we don't know
I
what
would say-
literature didn't survive.
right, we don't know the literature that did, we read, so here,
So
we
we're
read the book of
violent
Ruth.
because that's.
We read the book of Ruth, which I remember, after we read Judges, we read Ruth, even though it's out of order in the Jewish Bible. Because that was kind of the ending though, to the book of Judges, was it was a peaceful story about love, right? But I would argue like, or, you know, if you want violent literature, there's plenty of violent literature that is top literature, right? If you want or art movies or things like that, right? You know, or even, you know, like Saving Private Ryan, right? Didn't it win the Oscar, right? That was one of the most violent movies that, like, it was revolutionary. How violent was it? Right?
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare was violent.
I forget the professor's name.
Go see Macbeth.
It'll come to me, but there's a lot of studies about, in fact, how much less killing there's been in the last 50 or
No,
60
that's
years
right,
versus
that's-
antiquity.
Yeah,
What's his name?
Stephen.
Pinker, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Where since World War II, much less.
Yes,
And
there is
World War
much,
II was a little bit of
there is much,
spike.
there is much less,
Pinker, right.
right, there is much less violence in the world, even with,
Even
you
with
know,
what was
spikes in violence. And even, you know, there's a lot, a lot less violence in America than there was 40 years ago, right? New York City is the safest city in America, like people don't want to admit that, but New York City is the safest city in America, right? And yet, we still love violent literature. And movies, we love.
I mean, I
violent-
think people clearly, people love and read violent literature, but there's so much more to our literature.
Well, then, there's so much more literature than we have. Right?
We have fiction.
Yeah, yeah.
Fiction didn't come into existence till.
We have the tools, yeah, but here's the question, like, in 200 years, all the literature we have, who's gonna be reading that, right? You know, like, there's only some things that survive over the ages, right?
And you think
You know,
they'll be
like-
the violent ones?
What that?
They're gonna
I
be
don't
the
know.
violent ones?
I don't know, we'll see.
Just
Like,
have
you know,
Godfather?
You know, like, okay, so, Mozart still survives now. You know, you all think the Beatles would survive, but will the Beatles survive? Who knows, you know?
Mozart, Beethoven,
I hope
Yeah.
so.
Bach,
Yeah, but
Chopin.
but all their colleagues didn't survive, right?
I hope so.
We know Bach, but we don't know all Bach's colleagues. Right? Handel, I guess, right? You know,
Vivaldi.
it's Vivaldi, there you
All
go.
the things that are relevant to life is happening, archetypes.
Yeah.
Themes that underline.
You need to borrow it.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
And then you have death and love.
Yeah,
Those
yeah,
things.
Speak up.
yeah, yeah,
I think.
thank you, yeah, yeah. All right,
Empowered.
good.
Yeah.
Long story short, beach talk cause violence, and also when you have literature now that has violence, beach talk too, but it's still like, we're still just as violent. We still have it in us to be just as violent.
Or you take it part of like, I'll read a mystery story, it's part of the, it's part of the story.
Video games are a huge part of culture and they're very violent, yeah. Yeah, literally, yeah. All right, here comes up.
I guess back to centralized government, centralized government tends to, well,
Centralized government kills violence internally,
yes.
exerts violence externally.
Yeah.
A centralized government has a monopoly on violence,
Right.
as philosophers will say, right? And so we outsource our violence, but having a government means we individuals outsource our violence to the government.
Yeah.
To the cops, to the army, right? That outsources the part.
But you know,
Right.
it's the underlying of the violence from the fomenting from the
Well,
inside.
so that is-
Rebellion to the
That's
outside.
right. Exactly.
It's a challenge.
Everybody look how far we've come. When this group was started, I wasn't here at the very beginning. But look how now everybody kind of chips in when you have these conversations, which are very, very interesting. So I think they enlighten this, so thank you.
Good, good, okay,
I agree.
here we go, here comes going. No se me se hazara. Oh, yeah, no se Baruch Eloheinu sha'achanu mishalo, utubo chayinu, Baruch hu, Baruch shemo, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Even days of I hear, I could get Rabbi Amenu, Baruch atah Adonai, come on, you shall Harachaman, Yitokalidu Nelam Ba'ed, Harachaman, Yitorach V'Shamayim Ba'aretz, Harachaman, Yiswach V'Chavavah, Uvava B'Ayit Hazeh V'Yashulchan Zeh, Yishalchanu Alai. Harachaman, Yiswachanu, Et Eliyahu Hanavi, Harachaman, Yiswachanu, Et Eliyahu Hanavi, Viva Semani, Viva Semani, Viva Semani, the sun just what you want and Harachaman, Velu Yom Shekulo Shabbat, Nucha L'Chaye HaOlamim, Ose Shalom B'Rama, Yaseh Shalom B'Aleinu V'Yakol Yisrael V'Yakol Yisrael V'Yimeru Adonai Ose Ho Yiten, Adonai Yivarech Et Amo V'Ashar.
Amen.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
We're gonna take, next week, we're gonna take off. And,
So those supposed to go away.
Thank you.